Welcome to the shading and form portion video. This is actually live drawings from the class that I'm currently teaching. So again, the speed is going to be a little weird, but hopefully, we can manage. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is the elements of art that are involved with shading. That's going to be line, shape, form, and value. Difference between shape and form: shape is just a 2D object, form is 3D. You could create forms using lines or value, which is shading. Here I talk a little bit about shading techniques. That first little shaded area, I was showing that if you put or angle your pen or pencil a little bit more horizontal to the paper, that's how you achieve some smooth shading. In order to avoid lines on your paper when you're shading, try to shade in perpendicular directions. So I'll shade one way, and then in a perpendicular area, I'll shade another. As you can see on the ball, maybe I'll shade one curved direction, and then over that, I'll shade another curved direction. This is where I also talk about some simple value blocks. We have your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights. Your shadows are going to be the darkest darks. Your midtones are going to be your grays. And of course, highlights, you want to kind of keep plain white. This is where I gave students some time to try out some shading practice, starting off with 3 boxes where you have your shadows, your midtones, leaving the last box for your highlight. Next, we did the 5-block value scale, where I suggest that you start off with your darkest dark, then your midtone, leaving that last box white, and then filling in those 2 other boxes that we skipped. So that's like your second dark and then your second light. Next, a smooth value scale, where you do a smooth transition from dark to light. One key thing when it comes to shading is to do it in layers. Don't fill out your darkest dark right from the get-go. Build that your darkest dark through multiple layers. It might be 4, might be 5, it's really up to you. And there you can actually see me build in that dark a little bit more. Here I go over a little bit about drawing using guidelines, which you can see in a previous video. But I also wanted to talk about contour lines. What is a contour line? Imagine a 3D mesh that wraps around your object. This is another way that you can create form using line, or making a shape 3D by using line. Here I'm demonstrating how to do shading, where I'll start off with a mid-tone type of value, which is gray. And I'll kind of curve my shading around the object according to those contour lines. A little bit earlier, you saw some very flat shading, where I'm just shading going up along the curve of your object. Is going to make it look a lot more 3D than shading straight up and down. So think about how your object looks. So think about the contour, shade along the contour, and remember that your shading is going to change based off of the object that you're shading. For example, I would shade a cylinder very differently than I would shade cubes, or even circles and pyramids. You can build forms to create different types of images. Here's me using some basic forms to draw a face. Circles, spheres, cubes, triangles, they're all basic shapes and forms that make up a human face. And you could use those forms in anything that you see. You could use it in cars, breaking the car down into multiple cubes, maybe some pyramids. And if you know how to shade a form, let's say a sphere, I know that I would shade the bottom of the sphere if light's coming from the top. I know that a pyramid would create a pyramid shadow at the bottom, Or maybe boxes that are jutting out on a sphere are going to have some shadow right underneath it. It helps you build things without having to use a reference. Now, this was just a quick demonstration of how an artist actually shades vertically, but they're very selective about it in the areas where they won't shade vertically. So that little awning that we have there, it's basically a form. It's a long box. And they shaded the bottom based off of the lines of that box, which is why we don't see it shaded straight up and down. So this was just an example to show that not everything that I'm saying is 100%. You need to follow it. These are the rules, right? They're merely suggestions. Suggestions that have worked for me, and hopefully suggestions that can work for you. But if you want to try something, give it a try. Shade up and down. You might be able to make it work. Many artists have, right? Do what feels right to you. Drawing is supposed to be an explorative activity. So here I use everything that we've talked about, everything that we learned to draw a picture of a lion. I'm doing a quick thumbnail sketch to see how it's going to look. Kind of helps me plan things out, helps me visualize what I'm going to do. And then I try finding the basic shapes of my lion, breaking it down to where I can, using big round shapes for his mane, figuring out the shapes for his face, finding middle lines, seeing that the paw is directly under his ear, thinking about the angles. You can do this with any animal. I noticed that the body was too long compared to the mane. So I decided to shrink it a little bit, probably still a little bit longer than the picture. That's okay. The point of my drawings isn't to be a photocopier, right? Just getting the general proportions down. Again, here I am talking about negative space and positive space, this time I think for the first time in the class. Looking at the shape between the legs, it looks good, it feels good, and pretty soon I'm going to be stylizing, right? So using shapes and lines is my first step. Once everything feels good, you can stylize it however you want. You don't necessarily have to follow those guidelines. You can begin to kind of go away from them. You can push forms a little bit more. You can push poses a little bit more to create more interesting drawings, such as this. And this is just me quickly doing something, right? It feels a lot more expressive to me. Now, unfortunately, the rest of the video I wasn't able to finish the line drawing. I got all my lines in, and I think I stylized it the way that I wanted to. Nothing too crazy, right? I could always push things a little bit more here and there. For the most part, I kept to the same relative guidelines. And here you can see some slight shading that I was able to get done. I hope you enjoyed the video. Apologize if it's a little chaotic. Like I said, I'm using live footage that is both sped up and slowed down. Thank you for watching.